Now you were live.
So we are live. It's the Education Committee, which has come out of a joint hearing with the GovOps committees of both the House and the Senate. And we're now switching gears back to S15. And we have with us Jay Nichols from the Vermont Principals Association, just to give us their thoughts on S15. This will be the walkthrough. We took a little bit of testimony yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, and then now taking some more testimony today on S15. So, Mr. Nichols, we'll introduce ourselves around the table. Start with
Ira Shane, good to see you again.
Dave Reed, good to see you. Seth Bongard, Bennington.
Harry Williams, Rutland District.
Steve Everett in Addison County District.
And then introduce yourself for the record, and off we go.
Keisha was on.
Oh, Keisha. Is Keisha on there? I'm sorry. Senator Ron Ramsdale.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I think my audio was on and you might have heard my daughter. But yes, I'm here.
Yeah, I heard your assistant, Senator Rom.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now
yeah. Hi everybody. So Jay Nichols, Executive Director of Vermont Principals Association. I just noticed that you only had Gwen coming in, so I was able to change my schedule around so I could jump on with you for a couple minutes. And I'll only take a few minutes. For the record, Jay Nichols, Executive Director of the Vermont Principals Association. I want to start by clearly stating that the VPA fully endorses the testimony that's going to be provided to you by the chair of the Advisory Council on Literacy. We have a member on that committee who served as vice chair and is an outstanding principal who has received statewide accolades for the improved performance of her students at the elementary level and later as a high school principal. So we are committed to high quality literacy instruction. The report that Gwen's going to share with you has a lot of great recommendations that we believe the General Assembly should strongly consider. Additionally, this is our first year under Act 139, the new reading law, so people are just starting to implement it. One of the biggest complaints consistently from the field is that legislation is passed and then modified or augmented or jettisoned without giving it time to work. So the people actually doing the work in the field, principals, teachers, and support staff, become very frustrated with this dynamic. What I know about research about programs is that if you don't actually give them time to be implemented thoroughly and with a degree of fidelity, you're not likely to see positive results over time. I think this is true with laws also. And full disclosure, when I was a superintendent, I used to I did a lot of surveys of my teachers, my support staff, my principals, my community, my school boards. And one of the things I hear over and over again is don't change things. Keep things the way that they are for 2-3 years, then make adjustments after we see data and research. And so that's how I've tried to live my leadership life. And I'd strongly encourage you to do that the same here. So we at the VPA would encourage you to make no changes impacting Act 139 during this biennium that would actually change the implementation of the law, but rather lean into the recommendations from the Advisory Council to help the law be implemented in a manner that works for schools and thus ultimately for children. I think the most important thing the General Assembly can do is to make sure that any change in funding for schools doesn't leave our neediest students with even less resources to help them improve reading achievement. And I'm hoping I can come in at some point and spend some time with you on the governor's proposal. I've testified in Ways and Means and House Ed on that, and would really like to have a conversation with you folks on that. I also want to say, and I think you all know this, but it's important to recognize that there's a very strong correlation between student reading achievement and economic success in the family and the status of the family. So it's our job as a state, through our schools and other programming and providing necessary resources, to try and mitigate this fact and to decrease the gap between students based on economic status in terms of like reading achievement, math achievement. Many of the recommendations and information in the Advisory Council's report speak to these needs. And I'll send you some written testimony. I just worked on this over the last little while because I didn't know I was going to be coming in here today. And I'll send it to Will here, the next half hour or so. I also went to our friend ChatGPT and came up with a few resources that talk about the relationship between student reading achievement and economic status. And the reason I think that's important is that you could almost take a overlay of reading test scores across the nation and lay them on top of a grid on economic status, and you'd see a very strong correlation. And one of our jobs in education is to try to break that correlation so that your zip code for most kids doesn't become a reality of what your achievement's going to be, but that schools have such high quality instruction that they can reach all students. And that's what we should all be trying to do. So we certainly support resources, especially K-3, really pushing hard. As a superintendent, I always said that as a K-3 student, you were learning to read. As 3 through 12th grade, it was all about reading to learn. So we need to do everything we can to make sure all of our students are strong, independent readers by the end of 3rd grade, because after that, reading is really the doorway to learning other content. And that's all the prepared comments I have. I know it's Friday. I want you guys to get on the road. A lot of you have a lot of driving to do, but I'll take any questions that you might have for me.
Senator Weeks.
Thanks, sir. So, thank you, Jay. Just for clarity's sake, I'm not exactly sure if I followed the intent of what you said about whether to make modifications to S15 now or wait.
I would wait. I would wait. I might look at some other areas like resources and things you can do to support it. So one example, and I don't have the council's report in front of me, but I remember one of the things they talked about in there was having a full-time person at the Agency of Education that really focused on early literacy and support for the field. That's an appropriation consideration. I think that's an example of something that could be done that would actually help the field out. If you look through that report, if I remember right, it's like 15 pages. If you look through that report, there's suggestions in there by a lot of the organizations, including the VPA. And I know one of the things we put in there was there needs to be resources so that the teachers can get the training. Even as I was leaving the superintendency, Senator Weeks, we were having a lot of teachers that were a lot less experienced coming into the field. And so that often would mean giving them training. And that would mean like hiring substitute teachers. So just resources to do things like that. So those teachers can go out and get some really strong reading trainings from like the Stern Center or something along those lines, or training in Orton Gillingham, because a lot of new teachers are not receiving that in their pre-service. So we have to do it once we hire them as employees.
Senator Weeks had a follow-up.
Yeah, I'm not sure my question was clear enough. So my takeaway from the other testimony, yesterday's testimony, was that we kind of like, because of S15, one word, we're inadvertently leaving behind grade 4 through 12 challenged readers. And that was a mistake in the bill that should be like immediately corrected. No one else has come forward and said that we should pause, wait to see the effect. That the effect was, it's an inadvertent, we've left out a group of potentially challenged readers that we're not adequately addressing those needs in S15.
Yeah, I don't think that's the case at all. The testimony that I remember from, and of course this is last year, the testimony that I remember from last year was that was done on purpose in the end, because the idea was there wasn't the resources and training enough for all the schools all the way, 4th grade through 12th grade. Who's paying for the physics teacher to go get the extra reading training? Who's paying for all the math teachers to get that extra reading training? So my understanding, my memory of it was the focus was going to be more on K-3, and that the older grades, you have MTSS, multiple tiered systems of support. You have EST plans, you have IEPs that are kicking in. So a lot of those kids that need that extra support, like one of my grandsons, he gets extra support, but it's not through Act 139. It's because his school sees, he's struggling in this area, so they give him extra support in this area through their current MTSS system. So that law calls for like screeners and things like that. We don't have screeners out there for older kids. I mean, kids like my grandson would be like, why are you making me do this baby stuff? I think it'd be real problematic. But I would ask Gwen about that, because to be fully honest, Senator, she's the expert in literacy. So we defer to her a lot. And that council is really strong. But my understanding of it is it was intentional to decouple those.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Senator Weeks actually, his follow-up question was exactly the question I had, so all set. Thanks.
Oh, come on, Senator Hashim. No question.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you for coming on quickly to help us.
Absolutely. I'm
Okay.
gonna listen to Gwen. She knows a lot more than I do. And again,
She's
be
here.
careful. Yeah, I see her. Be careful on the roads, you folks. I know a lot of you travel a long way, and thanks for your continued commitment to Vermont students.
You're welcome to stay on if you want to and listen.
Yeah. I'm gonna listen
so,
for sure.
Why don't we go ahead and move to? Now you missed us.
Okay.
You missed us introducing ourselves, so we'll do that again. We just started early. So
Nargashim, Wyndham County.
Nice to see you again.
Dave Weeks, Rutland County, good to see you.
Hi, nice to see you.
Step Longveston, Bennington Senate District.
Hi, so nice to meet you.
Sherry Williams, Rutland District.
Hi, nice to see you again.
And Steve Heffernan, Edison District.
Hi, and I think we've met, but and nice to see you.
And on Zoom, we have Senator Rob Hinsdale, who you can't see, but
Oh, okay. Hi,
There.
Senator Hinsdale. Nice to see you, or not see you. All right, and I
So-
did bring
so
some.
before you start,
Oh, yes.
introduce yourself for the record.
Of course, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm Gwen Carmoli. I'm Director of Curriculum in Colchester, and I wear a couple different hats. And today, one of the hats I'm wearing is as the Chair of the Advisory Council on Literacy. I also am one of the presidents and co-president of the Vermont Curriculum Leaders. I work closely with my colleagues at the VPA, VSA, the Superintendent's Association, School Board Association, and curriculum leaders across the state. So I'm here today representing the Advisory Council on Literacy, who has representation from every corner of the state and has been really working on Act 28 and then Act 139 tasks that have been outlined in enacted law. I did bring a few materials for you, if you don't mind. I like to let you know, I am a little bit old school in this way. I like to let people know. I think one more. You're welcome to have one also, if you like. You're welcome. So I brought my testimony. I brought the report we did, the most recent report for the Advisory Council on Literacy. And then I included in the back our VCAP, our Vermont Comprehensive Assessment scores. I'm really here today to give an update on the work that we've been doing. It was first outlined in Act 28, which was enacted in 2021, May of 2021, and then was switched and the council was continued in Act 139, which began last May. The Act 139.
So, but
Oh, yes,
we
I'm
want you
sorry.
to connect your testimony to this 15.
Sure, yes, so there is that problem. Act 139 came about. Act 28 really focused on early literacy. There were a series of funds and initiatives that were focused on how do we strengthen early literacy skills. There were a series of tasks that were out there. As Act 28 was winding down, Act 139 was in consideration. It's here in the House. I think the bill that was working its way closest to 139 was S204. And then the House was working on a couple bills. It went to conference committee and it ended up with a continuation of the council, the same 5 tasks that we had before, a focus on increasing achievement for all students, but really focusing on early intervention. And that was outlined in the tasks that we had to do. And each year we have to do an annual report. In Act 28, the annual report was to you, to the House Education Committee, to the State Board of Ed and the Agency of Ed. In Act 139, it switched over to, we will advise the secretary and the secretary will do the advocacy. So we're right in this transition period between 2 bills. While that was happening, Act 139 passed, implemented, it's been focused on K-3. And then a question came up about 2 words in the bill, such schools. The bill starts with its, the title of the bill is an act related to supporting Vermont's young readers through evidence-based. It was focused on K-3. In the first couple pages, it had a section that says K-3 assessment. That's where its focus was. There was a part that said it was about supplemental intervention and adjustments to statute 2903. And it said such schools. Such schools was referring to the line in front of it, which was, I think it said kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade. So it was defining that. There was a question of could that actually be all schools related back to the previous 2903, which was, it was a K-3 bill or a K-3 statute. And then there were, it was C and it was C1, 2, and 3. And those additional pieces outlined grades beyond grade 3. There was something for grade 4 and there was something for grades 5 through 12. So S15 was about, could that section in some way get restored in the bill? The question also was asked of the advisory council, where would the advisory council stand on this? Well, we're in this tough spot. We're not really, our Act 139 puts our advice toward the secretary now. But I do feel, and I stuck myself out a little bit on a limb. I said, this is related to work we've been doing. And I feel that we should ask the question and be responsive to this. So the work we've been doing has been focused in those early grades. The resources we've been using, the research, evidence-based resources have been focused in those grades. I would say the most important thing from the council's point of view is that Act 139 that's being implemented across the state gets to stay as a K-3 bill. That's really important. That's happened. Jay is correct. Elementary schools have different screeners that they would use than you would use at a middle or a high school. You would, so for example, they have phonemic awareness, which is fine rhyming in the beginning of words, of ending sounds of words. You would not screen a high school student on rhyming in the beginning and ending sounds of schools. You would screen them on a reading passage and ask comprehension questions, but that's not what the bill outlined. That bill outlined universal screening on phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. So staying as a K-3 bill is really important. This question about could there be a clause, a section of the bill that refers to more grades? It could, but it needs to make sure it's in the context that the other requirements are in there are not necessarily the same as what would happen there.
Just to
Yes,
for a second.
please.
My understanding of the way that the bill works right now is that it does continue if you are a school that is K-3, and yet doesn't adhere if you don't have. It doesn't adhere if you don't have K-3. So are you saying it doesn't make any sense for it to apply to any grade other than K-3?
The interpretation that we've been focusing on is actually the grades. It's not necessarily the structure of the school. It's which grades are you teaching.
But I think we understood the way the bill actually ended up, and the reason for the amendment is that it doesn't adhere. The requirements continue past grade 3 if you are a school that starts with K-3.
That's not how I understood the law to be.
So, but in any event, your testimony is that it should adhere to K-3.
Correct. That Act 139 was designed around grades K-3, the universal screening for students in those grades, the parental notification, the data collection. Those are around grades K-3. I agree with Jay. Hi, Jay. Sorry. I agree with Jay about the grades beyond grade 3. There's another set of requirements in the state that are already in place for every grade, kindergarten through grade 12, called MTSS. It sits in our statute 2902. It sits in Act 173. It's in our Vermont MTSS field guide that covers every student, every grade in academics and in social emotional learning. And it says we have to provide tiers and layers of support based on the student's needs. I don't get to say no thank you to that. And every school, every grade is working on that, or every public school and approved independent school that that it follows that requirement, is working on those layers and tiers of support.
So do you mean for like a student who you realize in grade 5 is
Yes.
reading well, isn't?
Yes,
Yeah.
and so an example of that in my school system, I have a middle school and I have a high school. I have 2 K-2 schools, a 3 to 5 school, a middle school, which is 6-8, and then a high school. And every one of those grades, the schools, we have different literacy supports. In the primary grades, we have reading teachers who pull out small group or push in and do small group instruction or one-on-one instruction. We have special educators. And my middle and high school, we have a reading specialist in each school, and it often looks like a second class. So you might have a humanities class or a literacy class, and then you might have a second lesson. You might be a second reading support. It's in my middle school. What do we have? Strategic reading, it's called. And so students would attend their 6th, 7th, or 8th grade literacy class, and then they have an additional class. And then we also have things called intervention time. In middle and high school, sometimes it's called WIN or What I Need time. Sometimes it's called I time, or there's a block of time. Sometimes it's home based, and you have an extra time with a teacher or a student. Teachers sign up with the students. So there are a whole bunch of sports. And then there are support services as well. So we have students who are on 504 or IEP plans. And so they have additional things that they're working on. So there are already layers of support that are happening. So I'm not sure I'm not sure I fully agree with the testimony to date, but I share the how do we best provide the supports to increase achievement. I absolutely share that hope and that work. But MTSS covers many of those pieces. So that's how I've interpreted.
Okay, let me ask both of you, you've got a question, but ask both of you.
I'm turning this
So
way to
as
see you,
part of your
Jay.
testimony, to just make sure I understand this correctly, that in order to do what S15 would ask you to do, you would need additional resources of some sort.
You may. I'm not sure every high school. I mean, we are fortunate to have a reading specialist. I have special educators, but I have a reading specialist in addition to special educators at my middle and high school. I don't know that every middle or high school, every school that has grades beyond grade 3 has that.
That's right.
But we almost all have some sort of reading specialist, sometimes through Title I, the federal dollars or federal program. Or voter budget, our local budgets, where we put these early resources in. And statute 2903 has been in place since 2009, and it was about the early grades, early intervention, early grades. So a lot of schools put resources there.
And Jay, just to.
Yeah, I think it does vary. I think one of the things you'll see the more you folks are involved with education policy in the state of Vermont is that it's all over the place. So I think there are some schools, Gwen's right, MTSS, ETS plans, schools work hard to follow those. I think there's some schools that have a lot more resources than others. And I think the budget issues of last year and the concerns for budgets this year are also a factor that are playing into this. I've talked to some principals who are saying like, we don't know if we're going to be able to keep our reading specialists. And they certainly don't have the professional learning money to send. I was a social studies teacher, so I would work with my students on how to understand social studies content, but I wasn't a reading specialist. And most teachers from 7th through 12th grade especially don't have a really strong reading background. So it's important to make sure we get those resources early and that we have interventionists in the schools that can provide those supports. I think most school districts have that, maybe not as much as they'd like. But if we're going to go much further than that, at the higher levels, it's going to take some resources. And to be honest with you, I don't know. It's very uneven, Senator, across the state. That's how I would best address that.
One of the members of the council, so I've invited input. It's not finished. It's closing next Friday. So I'm hurrying to get it as quickly as I can, but I don't know which member this is, so I can't tell you the name. But I do know that one of our council members is a principal of a middle and high school. So I'm kind of guessing this person might be, it might be that person. She said, the person indicated, well, I support the concept of providing supplemental instruction to all struggling learners. I have some concerns. First, this legislates an entitlement that is specific and not always the appropriate intervention. A high school student may be receiving a literacy lab instead of English language arts rather than as a supplemental instruction. Some of our juniors and seniors have very individualized education programs. They may be in a CTE program or might be doing a flexible pathway. Work-based learning, alternative pathway for academic credits. This person goes on to say, I have concerns that this goes above and beyond our MTSS requirement. And additionally, while many schools have been lucky enough to invest in staffing to support all struggling reading with highly qualified staff, this change could result in an additional professional teaching position at a time when schools are being asked to cut. I don't know who the person is who has said that, but I thought they were important. I wasn't even thinking of those factors. I absolutely support our struggling learners and the initiatives. And I am out there everywhere I can, like trying to promote professional learning. I encourage middle and high school teachers to attend professional learning. Read Vermont is K-12. But this law was focused, the 139 was focused on grades K-3. Adding that change, I think if it were to add, if it were to proceed in adding the change, I think you should clarify that it is about the support, and that support needs to be flexible for that middle or high school student. So that it's not exactly the same as what it would look like in grades K-3, and that it does not require the universal screening and pieces that were designed in the bill for those early grades. I think it would need more clarification.
Questions? Well, no questions? Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Just, I know you guys have had a long week, so I just wanted to put a little funny thing out there for you. You've got Beth St. James in the room now, so really, if you have any questions about anything, she can fix it.
Did you call my name?
Question.
Oh,
Hi, I'm trying to wrestle a baby and be useful at the same time. I'm not sure if we decided already that there's we're slowing down and gonna hear more. So not voting too quickly on this as I had offered I think yesterday. I was actually at a meeting with school teachers last night where they and literacy specialists where they expressed that this paperwork does take a lot of time and it's taking them away from kids right now at a time when they are facing cuts in the CBSD and South Burlington school district. So that helped me as somebody who couldn't understand why there would be opposition to look at the paperwork and see that they want to be able to accurately fill out the paperwork. And also, they are in the midst of cuts where they don't want to say that something is going to be provided to a child that, they don't know if the person who's going to deliver that is there. So I also hope that just underscores the importance of our broader work to ensure, that dollars really go to student success and that be central to our reform efforts. So apologize for the informality of my toddler screaming into the camera, but I just wanted to say that as the person who kind of couldn't understand the opposition yesterday. I had a valuable meeting last night.
Okay, thank you. Senator Weeks.
Yeah, I'm still a little confused, to be perfectly honest. Is it sometimes, my short experience here is sometimes it's good that folks who testify actually contact each other and see if they agree or disagree on what kinds of the recommended change. And I'm just wondering if when we can link her with Dr. Dorfman, who gave the other kind of compelling testimony. And I can still swear that they're kind of saying something different. I'm not quite sure with that in mind, if we should even be pursuing, any changes to it. That's what.
I agree with that. Because from what you're saying, is there are resources in place now that take the place of S15 once you're past fourth grade. Correct?
I would say requirements.
There are requirements.
Resources adequate or otherwise. But
And all that changing the wording would do was make it more just complicated and hiring somebody to do that and add more to administrative costs because it requires so much.
Changing the wording creates an additional requirement to the requirement that's currently there is kindergarten through 12th grade, MTSS 2902. S15 layers on top of that another requirement that says for grades 4 through 12, if you are a struggling reader, you would be required to have supplemental reading instruction. We may not have all of the resource for that. I don't know that, but this MTSS already says that if you have an academic area of need, we have to provide a layer of support, a tier or layer of support. Yes.
So just to make sure we fully understand this then. So adding this through those grades, if you're saying that you already have to do it, what does adding this on top actually do or not do?
What it does inside the bill of Act 139 is it can confuse Act 139. This is my concern. I'm not that concerned about the wording or the idea of adding support. I share that. But the confusion of Act 139 is that if that wording then becomes this is a K-12 bill, that means grade 6 or grade 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm doing that universal screening on phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary comprehension. Those are appropriate for early grades. Phonemic awareness and phonics is really about grades K, 1, and 2. If I put that, Jay's right, if I put that in front of a high school student, tell me which words rhyme, they are going to laugh me out. And there isn't actually a screener that looks at a high school level. I mean, they have little birds, they look like young children materials. And yet what you might do in the middle and upper grades is you might do a reading passage. The student does not do well in that. And then you would back up and you do some diagnostic assessment to find out where that student is struggling as a reader. But it confuses the bill. There's a requirement for professional learning. There's a requirement for data collection. Which is attached inside our continuous improvement plans. K-3 schools that have grades K-3 have additional requirements. And so my concern is the confusion, not with S15, it's the confusion and the chaos it will cause in Act 139. That's my concern.
Do you have a question?
Just a comment. I said, when Senator Hewitt introduced S204, she came to me and said, "Hey, I want your sponsor this bill." And I read it and I said, why do we need to tell schools what they should already know they have to do for reading? And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Do we need a law to tell schools that they need to do what they already know they need to do?" So the question I have for you is, how many schools are actually doing it? All right.
Act 139,
No.
or MTSS.
Yes, MTSS.
I would say we're all
Okay.
working on that. And
Okay.
we've been Act 179, which was passed fairly, or 173, which was reinforcing MTSS. Schools are revising their, I'm using a lot of acronyms, I'm sorry, their educational support teams, they're revising, they're using more data. So we're all required to do it.
Right, so
We're all,
there's a standard established,
yes.
who is making sure that it's being done?
That would be the principal, the superintendent, the leadership structures.
The curriculum coordinators.
Great, yes.
Yeah,
Make sure we don't leave you out, Gwen.
All
And-
right, we work hard.
And I think it's important, Senator Williams, to also point out that, again, though, it is a little uneven. So one of the things that Act 139 did, there were some school districts that were doing a really good job of informing parents on where their kids were in relationship to using
Right.
universal screeners, and parents would really know where their kids were at in relationship to certain reading standards in the early grades. And some schools weren't doing as good a job at that. And, our membership, we were pretty strong with our principals saying, this is a got to. You got to make sure you're doing this, just like MTSS is a got to. And so I think we're seeing in some places that weren't really doing a super job on this, that they're doing a better job. The places that were already doing it, in fact, some of my principals complained. They're like, some of our parents are saying, you already were doing all this stuff. Why do you have to write this certain letter this certain way now?
right.
And they were like, because the law changed. So for those places, it hasn't been that big deal. It's been a little confusing for the parents. But for some other places, I do think the law actually helped us to make it really clear to people the importance of early literacy. So I still think we were right to support 139. I still think you folks were right to pass it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree with that. And I think if I were going to do this sort of in a clean and different way, I might say, and I've suggested this to the literacy advocates. I met with Doreen and Cynthia Gardner and Gardner Morris and Emily Lesh, the Agency of Education. I said, I think it actually needs an entirely new 4 through 12 bill. And you need to know the research that is important for those grades. If you're going to talk about screening and include the requirements of screening, you need to make sure what does the evidence say is the best way to screen in those? What is the staffing that's needed for those? So I think there probably is a quick fix, but I think it could cause some confusion. If you do the quick fix, I think clarifying that Act 39 is about a K-3 bill, and there's a section that's requiring, similar to our MTSS, support for a struggling reader, but I really worry about the confusion.
So I remember another part of the conversation when the bill was first introduced is that we were concerned because we had students who were graduating from high school that had a 7th grade reading book.
Mhm.
And this was going to help take care of the problem by ensuring that everybody was on the same sheet of music for.
Well, and I would say to that end, we all share that goal.
Yep.
We're trying to increase achievement for every student, every grade. And our 8th grade literacy scores, that's one of the things I included for you. I included the VITCAP scores. They are higher on the NAEP than they are in grade 4. Grade 8 is higher. We're in the top 5 of the NAEP states. We're one of 7 states, or one of 6 states and 1 Department of Defense that were above the national average for grade 8. And then VITCAP, our grade 6, was it 6, 7, and 8, or 7, 8, 9? That they were the ones that made the growth. I highlighted it in green for you. Was it 6, 7, 8, or 7, 8, 9?
7, 8, 9.
7, 8, 9. So they made the growth, big growth compared to the other states. Our early intervention model actually is working. I support struggling reader, helping a struggling reader in any grade. I'm trying to preserve the good of Act 139, which is about early intervention and not confusing. That's my.
In the end, I think she did help unconfuse it for us.
Yeah.
Once you got through that, it's almost.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was helpful. With that, we are done for the week, as well as today as well.